Drunk and broke. Hey loves! I am Dramona Dramatics coming to you straight out of Dramadonia. Woo! Let's just get straight to the gravy because I have one whale of a tale to tell you. Today's episode is inspired by none other than Mr. and Mrs. Jones, whose property is just 3 doors down. As my feather-eared grandmother likes to say, choose your husband or wife wisely. It will save you a lot of time, heartache, and money down the road. Plus, believe it or not, it will stop you from raining on other people's parade too. The Joneses are in their late 20s. They got married a year and a half ago and moved here after their honeymoon. As soon as Grandma Germaine saw them, she bowed her head, said a prayer, and scurried on back inside. From the looks of things, they seemed happy and very much in love. At first. But that soon changed. It became apparent after a very short period of time that Mrs. Jones was not Mr. Jones's type, but her family has money, so marrying her seemed like a good idea to him at the time. One day, I was outside checking my Instagram and minding my own business when Mr. Jones ran out of the house with his wife's underwear on and rocking them better than she ever could, followed by various objects that Mrs. Jones was throwing at him. Well, I must say I was a bit taken aback by it, not because such a sight was new to me, but because of the people involved. It was not a scene I was expecting to see them portraying. So when the shock wore off and I was able to move, I quickly turned around and sprinted like an Olympic athlete into the house, and I stayed there. I didn't know them well enough to know what they were capable of, and I had no intentions to stick around and find out. Did you see that heffalump with that butcher knife? Now, my cousin Dramadonia and that certified lunatic Mrs. Jones had become quite close. One day she went over there to teach her how to cook because that woman couldn't even boil water, let alone burn toast. She was known as the neighborhood queen of takeout. When Dramadonia got there, the argument they were having turned into a fight. Apparently, Mr. Jones liked things nice and tidy, while Mrs. Jones was by far the complete opposite. Mrs. Jones decided she wanted a cat. However, she didn't want to assume the responsibility of cleaning up after it. The cat would constantly use Mr. Jones's favorite shoes as a toilet or simply crap in the kitchen sink, whichever one was more convenient. Well, the kitchen sink would remain uncleaned until Mr. Jones got fed up of looking at it and would clean it himself. So Mr. Jones tried talking to her about it, and from what I heard, she went stark raging mad. Mrs. Jones once told Dramadonia she preferred wearing diapers to bed because she couldn't be bothered to get up and go to the bathroom after turning in at night. The next incident I personally witnessed occurred one day while I was at my aunt's house helping her cook in preparation for a family get-together later that day. She lives right next to the Joneses. There we were minding our own business, admiring the goodies, when all of a sudden we heard shouting and dishes breaking. We stood there stunned and confused, and from the kitchen window, I saw some guy run out of the house and tracked it down the road with a look of sheer mortification on his face. So I thought to myself, good Lord, what in the macaroni hell is going on now? I have seen him before. He usually came when Mrs. Jones left and was gone before she came back, but I just assumed he was there doing some work. Mr. Jones stumbled out of the house shortly after, crawling around like a roach, all battered and bruised like he was in the fight of his life. He was literally screaming the whole time as he ran in circles for anyone to come and help him. The neighbors all tried to console and assure him that everything will be all right, but he was in complete hysterics, and it took him a while to calm the macaroni hell down. It turns out that guy who I thought was the help was in a relationship with Mr. Jones. For the next few days, every time the Joneses were seen, they were going at it. By that I mean Mr. Jones was receiving a beatdown. Then Mr. Jones left, and Mrs. Jones told us he ran off with his boyfriend. Mrs. Jones threw a party and invited the whole neighborhood. She said it was to celebrate her newfound freedom. We all had a good time. She served good food, we had great conversations, and danced ourselves silly to upbeat music. A month went by, and it was life as usual. Mrs. Jones decided to go on a cruise. Now, usually, the neighborhood dogs never ventured into her yard because they were afraid of Mrs. Jones, but upon noticing her absence, they were drawn to it like roaches to trash. One day, a dog was seen licking and gnawing at what appeared to be a human limb. Jim from across the street went to investigate, and upon arriving, he immediately called the police. The poor guy is currently struggling to keep it together. An investigation soon followed, and it was confirmed that human remains were found buried in the Joneses' backyard, and though it was too soon to tell, the body appeared to be that of a male. Mrs. Jones was immediately ordered to return home, so her cruise was cut short. Now, I refuse to bore you with the details, so let me summarize it for you. The situation with Mr. Jones and his boyfriend outraged Mrs. Jones so much that she knocked him out one night while he was asleep, dragged him into the basement, then began to dismember him while he was still alive. After she was done, she still did not feel satisfied, so she invited his boyfriend over, telling him she wanted to make amends so they could be friends. When he arrived, she offered him a drink which knocked him out, and then he met the same fate as his beloved Mr. Jones. She then rolled back the grass in their backyard and buried what she could without being noticed. Then she laid the grass back, stored the extra dirt in large plastic bags, and dumped them into the nearest woods. What was left of their remains, she fed to her guests at the neighborhood party she threw.